Good afternoon. Today is March the 6th, 2021. We are in Easton, Ohio, just outside of Doylestown, Ohio, to conduct an interview for the Kent State Guardsman Oral History Project. Thank you for agreeing to participate in the project. I am Jared Jones. I'm a history major in my junior year. I'm also a museum studies and public history minor.
And my name's Jordan Clag. I'm a junior as well at Ohio Northern University. I'm studying history as my major, and then my minor is public history and museum studies.
And if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yes, I'm Bob Hatfield, live here in Easton. I was in the Guard as the time that they're trying to record the history.
And where are you from?
Originally right here.
Yeah. How long and in what capacity did you serve in the Ohio National Guard?
I was in the Guard for 6 years. Started in 1969 and got out in 73. So in that time there was a lot of things happening.
Why did you join the Guard?
Vietnam War was going on, and I really didn't think I wanted to take a trip overseas.
What was your full-time job during your years in the National Guard?
I was a apprentice over at Morton Salt in the boiler room, and also in the tractor shop, and I went through an apprenticeship in the millwright shop also.
And in the National Guard, what was your job in the Guard? Like, what did you do in the Guard?
First little bit I was just a what they call a ground pounder, a regular soldier, and then towards the end there I become a armament person.
What were some of the reasons that your Guard unit was called out?
Started out as a truckers insurrection between the trucker strike. It was a union truckers out on strike, and the independent truckers were still hauling stuff, and they were getting very nasty about it, shooting at each other, throwing nails out on the road, anything you could think about to disrupt the other people from running the trucks.
And so, how did the trucker strike lead into getting called to Kent State?
We were over around Salem, not West Salem, but Salem, and the truckers down in the eastern part of Ohio were very adamant about each other. Some of them were hauling coal that were not union, and some of them were hauling stuff that were unionized. There were just all kinds of things going on. Some of them were shooting at people, and that's part of the reason I think we were armed at that time.
So what were your memories and experiences going from the truckers' strike to going to Kent?
Going to Kent, we were told that the armory on campus there had been set on fire, and they were taking us up there to help restore law and order. So that's what the problem was. The night that we went there, we went downtown, and I wasn't on that part of it, so I had heard that they went downtown and tried to solve it, make it more peaceful.
When you first got to Kent, can you describe what you saw? Can you describe the scene of Kent when you got there?
I was in the back of a deuce and a half, and it was kind of hard to see. All you could see is out the back door, and you could see cars and stuff like that. So that's the way that was.
Did you know that once you were at the truckers' strike, did you know that you were going to go to Kent, or was it kind of a mystery as far as what was going to happen after the truckers' strike?
All that was mentioned was the trucker strike. This other had not happened at that time. When Governor Rhodes declared or national put the Guard in there, that was to help the city of Kent because they were having problems with maintaining law and order.
And so the days between your arrival at Kent and then the days between that and the shooting on May the 4th, there was some days between that. What were they like?
Well, I was on night duty there and riding a Jeep with a highway patrolman and a Guardsman driving. And we would make the rounds around town and stuff and try to keep things going and keep them peaceful and stuff like that.
Have you interacted with state highway patrolmen? Is that who you were riding with in the
Yes, there
Jeep?
was one with us.
Did you interact with them frequently on other deployments, or was this more of an isolated?
This is the first time I was ever out. I was not in the Huff riots up at Cleveland, so I missed that part of it.
So when we get to May 4th, the day of the shooting, what do you recall of the morning? Can you tell me about that morning? What was it like?
That's an interesting morning. We were originally sleeping in the gyms or whatever, and that morning we had to move out. We went to the practice football field and put our tents up and stayed there. I think it was, I don't know, 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning, and we got our tents set up and everything and got to ourselves sleeping in by about 10. Whenever this thing started, that's when they rousted us and said, "We got to go." So we went there.
Do you remember feeling any sort of like anxiousness, nervousness? What were you kind of feeling, and what were maybe other people around you feeling or anticipating that morning?
Well, this is the first police action I'd ever been out on and stuff like that. I had just come back from basic training, which I had been down at Fort Polk, Louisiana, getting trained down there. And I'd come back in December, and this is May, which this is about, what, 4 months, 5 months there between the two. So I was on active duty, and then I was back on inactive duty here in the state of Ohio.
So, sorry.
Go ahead.
No, so tell me, like, from when you were roused from bed and told that, had to get down there, to the actual gunshots, that time in between there, like, what happened? What led up to the gunshots?
We went up the hill, pushed the students off the hill, and went down on the other side, and we were coming back when all of a sudden somebody started shooting. Don't know who, don't know what. People were getting hit with bricks, stuff like that, we were told.
Do you remember anything as far as after that day? So May 4th afternoon, what sort of happened after the shots were fired? Where were you, and what kind of happened during the rest of the day for that?
I remember that they come around, took our M1s, which we had for, the M1s had been in the Armory forever, and taken to Camp Perry and shot. Had thousands of rounds shot through them, so they were very wore. Sometimes those charging handles would come off because they were wore out. So after that, they come around and they gathered all those M1s up, took them to ballistics and checked them out to see who shot what.
And so, at the time, what do you recall about the media coverage? How did the media cover the shooting at the time?
Basically, in the National Guard, we had a spokesman that took care of most of everything, and anything that was said outside of that, they just told us not to say anything. They were going to handle it, publicity.
When you were deployed to Kent on May 4th, did you stay there for a number of days after, or what sort of happened after that day?
I think they wrote us back home. I don't remember the exact timeline anymore.
Sure.
But it's one of them things that they took the guns up there, they brought us back home, and the next thing I know, they brought the M16 in and put it in our armory.
So, you were in the Guard for some time after the shooting at Kent State.
Yes. I was there for, well, I had signed a 6-year agreement to serve there, so I did serve 6 years.
So, what was the mood like? You know, what were after like at weekend drills and during training? You know, how did people talk about it?
There wasn't a whole lot said. Wasn't anybody talking about that. They were just trying to get along and move on in their lives.
Do you think your experience as a relatively new guardsman at that time, how do you think that maybe shaped your experience of that day? Did it shape your experience at all, or?
It affects everybody in different ways. I'm very conservative anymore. I'm not for a lot of this stuff, different things like that.
And so, after the shooting, there was an investigation trials,
Yes,
both criminal and civil. How closely did you follow those?
I was involved in.
Can you tell me about the experience being involved in those trials?
Basically, we were told by the state attorney to answer the questions as truthfully as you could, but straight answers, don't answer any more than yours asked.
Were you ever afraid of? Were you ever afraid that the court case would go against you and your fellow guardsmen?
Who you are when you're in a trial. You don't know how you're going to react and what's going to happen. There have been verdicts that you can't even explain how they got the verdict. So it's one of them things you just go on about your business and hopefully you get through without having any problems.
Were there any individual instances that you can recall after May that you had been treated poorly as a guardsman at Kent State, or did you know of anyone else, perhaps in your company, or that you knew who was treated poorly because of the incident?
Not that I know of, but I live here. My unit is out of Worcester, Ohio. Was out of Worcester over here. Their sister, Company A, was in Akron. A lot of times we would go to summer camp. We would be with them in summer camp and know all our guys and stuff like that.
So, how have your feelings about Kent State, the shooting, the events that day, how have they changed over these past 50 years?
One of the questions that's popped into my mind, and I've never had anybody say it or say anything about it, what if there had been 4 guardsmen killed? Would there have been anything said? Would anybody represent them? They'd be the same as those kids. I'm the same age as those kids that were there. I actually went to Kent State up here at Wattsburg. So that puts you guys in kind of in that same relative as somebody comes along and puts you on the left front line and you're facing people that are similar to you.
At the time, when you were in the Guard, were you conscious of just how similar you were to the other people on the other side of the line?
Not really, but you know how that is. It hits you different times, different places.
Have you spoken privately or publicly about your involvement with Kent State, or just being in the National Guard in general?
Basically, I have not told too many of them that I was in the Guard at Kent State. A lot of people know I've been in the Guard, but that's the way the military was served at that time. You could serve in the Guard similar to what it is now.
Are there any? Oh, I'm sorry.
These gentlemen that went to Washington, D.C., they had an experience that they'll be talking about sometime in the future.
Are there any reasons why you haven't spoken much about it, or?
It sometimes riles people a little bit. It depends it's like politics. You're either on one side or the other, or you're neutral, one of the three. And it's kind of hard getting over or rubbing against somebody that thinks it's the opposite way of everything.
Do you think that that feeling of that partisanship, I guess, of where people are either on this side or that side or they're neutral, do you think that feeling has increased over the years, or do you think that's always been something that has been existent?
It's been there forever. It'll be there forever. There are things that you think of today that are normal now, but wasn't normal at that time. But yet, everything stays mixed up. It's just like the incidents in Washington, D.C. Nobody thought you were going to be fighting another battle there. But then you have all these timetables and everybody else with their own affair that they're trying to bring out.
So, you've mentioned Washington, D.C. a couple of times, and it's, I do want to ask about this. Like, in the past, like, calendar year, we've seen the Washington, D.C. Riot and like riots related to the George Floyd protests.
Mm-hmm.
Can you draw any parallels from Kent State to those?
Yeah. Part of it is politics. Our politicians can't answer the questions, can't solve the thing that they need to solve. We wouldn't be in this predicament if our politicians would listen to the crowd. That's the reason why you have these people that are ready to attack Congress down there. Some of these people are very adamant about their positions.
I noticed you mentioned Kent State Wadsworth. That's a branch campus of Kent State?
It was years ago.
Okay.
It no longer exists. It's here in Wayne County under Akron.
Have you been on the Kent State main campus site?
Yes, I stopped one time just to look at the Liberty Bell and the place where this happened. I just drove in and drove out because I didn't want to come across somebody that might have feelings towards one way or the other.
How did you feel when you did that?
I just relieved things, questions, and said it's still there.
In your opinion, has the narrative of the Kent State shootings, has it been fair to the National Guard?
I don't think they really bring out how young some of these guys are. Some of them are just high school kids in the Guards, trying to get their service in or trying to get their time in. Some of them are older people that want to serve their country. So it is what it is. Or some of them are trying to get college paid for. Another aspect of it. And a lot of people buy that way, rather than have an IOU for $100,000, which a lot of them are signing that too.
So you think the Guard is, in the narrative, in like the kind of narrative of Kent State, you think the Guard is often like dehumanized? The humanizing elements of them are kind of...
People push them off as an entity or a corporation.
All right.
And they are basically part of the military. They are run by Washington, D.C. Your government, I had a learning curve here with this pandemic. What is state rights? I've heard them, but I've never heard totally what state rights are. These are things that add in there that people don't even see or think about. And they were very important when the Constitution was written. So you have to look at it from both sides. Got some more questions?
No. Go ahead.
Has your opinion on, obviously your awareness of states' rights has increased. Do you believe your opinions or views have maybe shifted over the past year? or even just regarding, the National Guard?
As far as the National Guard, I look at the National Guard as like the Revolutionary War people. They are indispensable because they are the farmers that went into Massachusetts to confront the British. They're pretty much the military that was then at that time, which they had. Since you are history students, I'm sure you've read it and looked at it and considered it very much. There's a question that always appears in my mind: how did they communicate with each other, whereas we today have telephone and everything else? I still think the churches up and down the coast communicated, because they were the only ones that had any communication between themselves.
The other question I have is, first, I guess the first question is, in 1970, how did the people of Kent and just kind of your average civilian, how did they react to the shooting?
Before the Guard and the shootings, the Kent State businessmen wanted somebody to slow it down because they figured they'd get tore up like Cleveland did this last time when they had a riot downtown. None of them intended to bust the windows out, but they did. So, anytime you have a riot, you have a chance of having damage done. It's like Washington. They didn't think fast enough to put the Guard in there, so they didn't get their tear up. So, somebody didn't do their job.
So before the shooting, the people wanted the Guard to come in?
Yes, the businessmen wanted it because they were tearing their bars up. They were afraid of that.
And then after the shooting, how did people feel about the fact that, the shots had been fired and people had been killed?
Everybody was kind of remorseful about it, I'm sure. We weren't at liberty to go out and mix with the crowd, so we just stayed right there and wrote our Guardsman hands back.
And how do you think the opinions of people have changed about the shooting over the past 50 years?
Depends on whether you lost anybody that was in there and stuff like that. I could see the parents and everybody that lost somebody there having a problem with it, which I understand. It's bad when you have problems otherwise.
Would you have done anything differently as far as even going back to, one, joining the National Guard, and then two, at Kent State, would you have done anything differently?
Looking back, I might have went to the Air Force or something like that. Not because of that reason, because I would have had a trade, hopefully, coming out of there that I could use in the world out here.
And I guess my last question is, are you still in touch with any of the Guardsmen that you served with at the time?
I know several of them. I've just recently been talking to one or two that I don't know if they were there or not, but they were from the area here, and or knew them previously.
Do you think they'd be interested in a project like this?
I'm not sure if they would or not. I don't know if they have had that experience or not.
Gone to the Air Force rather than, besides, would the trade reason have been the only reason why you would have gone to the Air Force instead of the Guard?
I was interested in becoming an air mechanic for jets and stuff like that. I looked at some of that and wanted to do that. I have a brother that's a crop duster.
What was your occupation after your National Guard experience? Did you go into a trade or did you do something else?
I went and worked at Morton Salt and got into an apprenticeship program there for tow motors, did a stationary engineer's license for a while. One of the problems with the stationary engineer's license is they work a southern swing, which 1 week you work nights, 1 week you work second shift, and next week you work days. And that's your month. You get 2 days off in between. You get to the point to where you can't tell whether you're going or coming. You can't get set in your sleep, you can't get anything straight down. So, that's one, and I went to be a tractor mechanic after that, and I decided I wasn't cut out to do that, so I had to know the millwright shop. My dad had been a millwright there for a long time before.
And then another thing, I know you talked about the importance of communication all the way back to the Minutemen and the Revolutionary times to now, and even in the times between that. What kind of role do you think communication had in your experience in May? Was it something that you would call adequate? Do you have any thoughts or feelings about how that communication went down?
It's kind of hard when you're in a situation like that to have good communication. You have guys behind you that are supposedly directing or controlling you, but they're like sergeants or something or other, and they move people the way they want to move them to keep things going straight. It's like out hunting. If you're out hunting, you have to, if you're hunting with 3 or 4 people, you want to stay in a straight line. And as you go down the field, you go so you don't shoot each other. So you have your shooting ranges, which is like 45 degrees up in front of you. And this is one of the things that, being a hunter, that's why I know this, and so I end up looking at some of that.
Do you think that throughout your time in the Guard that the maybe style of communication, or did that change at all, or was that pretty much consistent throughout?
It's still there, but I see well, the best example I can give you is looking at some of these police reports when you see the camera on the officer and you see what's going on in front of you. You hear what's going on, but you also see it. And that explains it better than they can with words.
You mentioned the inventory of the M1s, which were the guns, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the ammunition after the shooting. What happened if the gun or the ammunition was missing?
They counted the rounds. I think that's what you're asking.
I think so.
They checked everybody out. Anybody that fired one, they marked them down. They wrote their name down. They had all this stuff. And that's where this lawsuit deal is. All these lawyers come in and they say, okay, we're going to take the whole big bunch because they can only take a big bunch. They can't add to it after they get that bunch. So they start pitching them out one at a time and say, oh, I don't want this, I don't want that. And so they got down to the point where anybody that fired a round had to go through that trial at Cleveland.
I do have my last question, I guess, would be, how did the Guard, I guess not how did, but did the Guard change at all? In tactics or in thought process or just in any way really post-Kent State?
We did more practicing on riot control, stuff like that, because it's been one of those things that pops up every time you turn around. Even today you're having to pop up. It's like the problem down in Washington, D.C. What about the problem in Oregon? We're burning the federal buildings down there, out there. You're still dealing with the same thing. Why are they allowed to do it there and in Washington you're not?
I guess my next question is, were you involved in any other deployments later on in your Guard career?
No, that was the only one. That was enough for me.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Unless there's anything else you want to talk about, I think we're good.
I realize it has changed my attitude some, but at the same time, you can't change it. If you like taking you guys up to Washington, D.C. and tell you, now put that crowd down out there, and they're mad at you no matter what. They're not mad at you personally, they're mad at everybody else and anything else that you go on. And it'd be nice if the politicians would start to listen a little quicker, a little sooner, and offer some change.
Do you think that that will be accomplished?
I see some hope here in Ohio with the governor trying to lead with his next budget. He's got money allocated for different things to help get people straightened around. It's like people in prison. When they come out of prison, they have a tough time getting a job. If you ain't making any money, you can't change your occupation. If you're a thief, you're going to end up being a thief again because of it. It doesn't let you change your colors. And then they need to put an apprenticeship program of some sort that they can have employment when they get out. And they need to find a way that they can issue them an identification or something that people will accept.
Thank you very
Yeah,
much.
thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate your time very much.